My name is Rachel Perry, and I am originally from Rochester, New York. We live in Corning, New York now, and I am 25 years old.
I'm Jeff Perry. Like she said, we live in Corning. I'm from Malone, New York originally. And that's all. Yes.
So we both went to Word of Life Bible Institute, which is up in the Adirondack part of New York. We met kind of randomly. It's a fairly small school, so we met, I think, because you sat behind me, right? It was assigned seating, and we met when I was almost 18, and Jeff would have been 20.
Yep.
And we were just casual friends for a while. We started dating that year, dated for 7 months, and got engaged, and were married 2 months later. So it was pretty quick.
It was quick.
I was 19, you were 21.
Nice.
So in the kind of camp, I guess you could say, of what we believe, they definitely believe in abstinence until marriage, and purity is a really big deal. It's a big deal. I mean, biblically it's a big deal as well, but it's something that I grew up, with a lot of emphasis on not only waiting until marriage, but on staying pure overall, like not just like don't have sex until marriage, but that just like my body is not my own, like it's God's until well, it's always God's, but it's kind of that I'm supposed to protect myself or keep myself pure until I meet the person that God has for me. And so that was something that I know that I was hearing from when I was old enough to even understand anything about those sorts of things. And it's something that was very important to me personally with what I believed. So even like in any relationships that I had, it was always like a given to me that I would wait until marriage, and that I wanted to save as much as I could for the person that I would marry someday. So, I mean, as far as how that affected my own sexuality, it's a little hard to look back, like retroactively to know where my head was at. But I would say, personality-wise, I was always kind of just a cautious person anyway, so it kind of lined up with how I was. When I became old enough to where I was, got my period, and my mom was talking to me about all of that sort of thing, I just didn't want to talk about it. Like, it was like, this isn't relevant now. I don't really know why we need to talk about it. So I was always very uncomfortable with those sorts of things. I didn't talk about it with my friends. I was always listening, but I never wanted to be part of those sorts of conversations. So I think I don't think I really had any reticence as far as I look forward to being married. I look forward to sharing, to kind of coming into myself sexually. I saw that as something in the future. And I definitely would say that I was very out of touch with my body, definitely. I can say that now, but I wouldn't have known that then, obviously. I just thought, what's the big deal? It doesn't need to, it's not a part of the now. So, when I was 12 and I got my period, my mom told me to try a tampon. My mom was very excited about oh, this is so great, you got your period, and I was supposed to be excited, which I wasn't excited. I was like, this is a bummer and I don't like it. And the tampon thing seemed super weird to me, but she said, you need to know how to do this, because it's something with sports and swimming, etc. You don't want to be chained to a pad. She told me how my sister got hers when they were on vacation at Disney World, and she just had to figure it out and use a tampon, and it was fine. And for me, it just wasn't fine. I did try it, but not really. I mean, it was this isn't happening. And I didn't want it to happen, and I just told my mom, I can't really use it. Or I don't know if I told her I can't or I don't want to. I don't remember. And she was fine with that. She was like, well, okay, someday you'll want to, but that's fine. I wasn't surprised about that. To me, it was it's weird. Why would I, And because I didn't talk to my friends about stuff like that, I knew a lot of girls use tampons, but I didn't really know yet at that point that it was everyone uses them and it's weird that I can't. I just thought it's like my preference that I don't like it. So I wasn't surprised at that point. When we were about to get married, and as soon as we were engaged, I went to a gynecologist to have an appointment. It didn't go well at all, and I didn't know what to think. I guess I wasn't surprised in that the whole process just seemed totally barbaric and scary to me. But I started to get nervous at that point because it was like, well, why do, other girls do this? And I guess maybe everyone hates it, but people can do it. Like, why can't I do it? But I was still really, really ignorant and of my body and kind of just delusional thinking like, well, this is in the doctor's office and this lady like is not a nice person and this is a stressful situation. Like, sex will be different, because it's something I want, it's something that's meant to be. Everything will just fit together fine once we get there. So it never occurred to me, even though I was surprised that it was, that I couldn't seem to get through the gynecological exam, I really didn't think that was, at that point, like I didn't put the tampon and the gynecological exam together and say like, oh, I have a problem. It was like, these are weird things that I don't want to do. Sex is something that I want. I was like, we were super attracted to each other. I felt, all the right things. And I was like, this is going to be completely different. God's going to bless it because we waited. And I was really, really convinced of that. Otherwise I would not have just kind of ignored it and charged ahead. So.
I remember the guy, like the exam didn't go well. I don't think you shared details with me, but I didn't think, I remember they thought there was a yeast infection
Yeah, I had a yeast infection when I
something minor, and I wasn't like worried about it. I wasn't concerned, I guess. Like I thought I had sisters, but I didn't know anything about, like, I was ignorant of it myself, so like so it wasn't something that was like, this is a red flag, like I had no idea. And I wasn't worried, I was thrilled to get married and didn't think anything would possibly be wrong,
So they suggested that it was painful because I had a yeast infection, and so I took some kind of tablet for a couple weeks, and the second time I went back it wasn't really that much different. But I also didn't really let them get very, very far because at that point I was pretty panicked about the whole thing. And so they were like, they were able to get like a con swab, so they're like, oh, you don't have a yeast infection. And part of what threw the whole process off is the woman was very sarcastic and everything, so she kind of put me, I was at the point where I wasn't taking her super seriously anyway, and so I was just kind of like, okay, if I don't have a yeast infection, that means I'm fine, you don't need to touch me, I'm just going to go. I wasn't diagnosed. They didn't even really say, like, oh, this is bad, this is a problem. It was just kind of like, okay, well, if you don't want it, you'll be fine. They didn't really say a lot about it at that point. And it was all like on the sidelines for me, as far as my perspective was like, okay, well, that was weird, but it's over and the wedding's in 2 weeks and everything will be fine. So at that point, I had no diagnosis.
Okay.
And no awareness that anything was actually really wrong with me. Very clearly by like week 2 of my honeymoon, I felt like something is wrong with me, but because I don't think this happens to people, it must be something that I'm in control of, kind of thing. And then I started thinking back to like, why didn't I follow through, with a gynecological exam? I've never been able to use tampon. Something's wrong, and I've like ignored it, So yeah, I felt a lot of shame about it. It was something that was like, I can never tell anyone. My mom and I are very close. So for me to not feel like I could tell her is kind of definitely a picture of the shame that I felt. And I felt a lot of guilt about Jeff, just that it was like, I just had this feeling like I owe him something, that's a really big part of this whole not contract, I don't know what the word is, but thing we've entered into together for the rest of our lives. Like, we both take very seriously that this is forever. And, you know, what have I, like, roped him into, you know? So I felt a ton of guilt. Shame towards everyone ever, and guilt towards Jeff that I wasn't, you know, like, able to deliver. And I didn't deserve to be married, and I journal a lot, and I journal a lot about that, like, the first couple months, just about how, like, in certain cultures, just how, like, I just felt like I didn't deserve to stay married to him. And that was really terrifying to me, because this was, to me, the most important thing in my life was marrying someone, you know, that I love with all my heart, and that I lined up with, you know, that we believe all the same things. So, yeah, a lot of guilt.
So after the first night, I guess, like, the honeymoon, I saw it as, like, I thought she was sick, you know, and I couldn't really, how could I hold that against her, you know? So it was like I was never upset, like, I wasn't mad, and we had a healthy sex life without intercourse, and it was really, I mean, partly because of the guilt, but also, like, we loved each other, and Rachel was, like, eager to, partly because of the guilt, but eager to, like, make sure I was happy, make sure I was satisfied, and I didn't, early on I figured it was, like, from the exam, like, it was still a yeast infection. I had no idea what it was, but I figured it was something that she just needed to go to a doctor, and it wouldn't be a big deal. And she felt a lot of guilt, but I was confident it was something that could be fixed, and I wasn't worried about it. I was thrilled to be married. And I, like, we both saved ourselves for marriage, so it wasn't something that I, like, knew, like, that I was missing. You know, like, it wasn't like I don't know, I was clueless anyway, and we had fun, and we were passionate and in love, and I hated, the biggest part was that I hated how much it did affect her, because because of how I felt, like, I didn't want her to bear the shame or the guilt that she was holding, because I didn't want her to have that because of me, or you know what I mean, because of something she couldn't give me, you know. Go ahead.
When I got back, we were uninsured. Like, that's a whole nother story, but we were just totally nuts and had no plan whatsoever. And so my first steps were to figure out, like, you know, who I could go to, and I immediately started looking that up. But I think I remember procrastinating a little bit about the actual appointment because I was terrified. But within a month, I went to a doctor in town, and I felt like that was the big step I needed to take. You know, like, if I do this, if I can handle it, like, everything will be fine. But I had, like, an increasing amount of fear about the whole thing, because I now, like, officially, you know, at that point I officially associated any kind of, you know, penetration or anything as pain. So I'm gonna go to the doctor, they're gonna figure it out, and it's gonna be painful. So I went to this doctor. I wrote kind of a book, you know, on the sign-in paperwork, because I wanted her to know before I went in what the deal was. And when I got in there, she just was very quick to go right to the exam, which didn't go well, which she was very frustrated by. And so she kind of just made a couple of attempts, and then just kind of, you know, pushed her table aside and said, you know, okay, well, it's probably, I can't do anything here, so we need to put you under, and I'll look at it, and we'll probably need to do a hymenectomy because your hymen's probably too small. which I was thrilled. You know, I wasn't a huge fan of her, but I was thrilled that, okay, there we go. You know, the opening is too small, as I thought, like, okay, there's something just wrong with me that can be fixed, it's fine. We scheduled it, we were gonna be paying for it out of pocket, but we just didn't even like give that two thoughts because we're like, this is getting fixed. Scheduled that 2 months out, had the hymenectomy, had the exam under anesthesia, came out from that and she said, you know, everything is normal, everything is fine, there's nothing wrong with you, except the opening was small, so I did this, you know, minor surgery, and you're fine. You know, she said, I can fit anything in and out that needs to go in and out, so you're fine, give it 2 weeks. So from there, I just developed, like, chronic pain in the area, which was very frustrating. After like 3 weeks, I was just in pain all the time, basically. And went back to her. She kind of had the same approach of like, I'm going to do an exam now because you're fine. Couldn't do it. And she just said, you know, you need to talk to someone because this is all in your head. And if you don't stop, you're going to develop vaginismus, which is an incurable disease. At that point, I left and said, thanks, I think I'm good here. But that was a very defining moment, I think, when she told me it was in my head, and I was upset. I think at that point I was crying, and the nurse took me aside a second because they didn't want me to just leave, you know, upset. And the nurse said to me, I don't remember all of what she said, but I remember the last thing she said to me was, yeah, I saw your husband out there and he's really cute. She said, you better start taking care of him before someone else does. And that's what she said to me before I left. And she didn't give me any new idea that I hadn't thought about before, so it's not on her. But that kind of is a summary of a lot of what I was feeling at that point, which was, you know, I know that we meant what we said at the altar, but if every woman in the world can give my husband something I can't, like, how can I see this as, you know, a strong, secure marriage forever? And how can I ask that of him, you know? So that was like the first round of treatment, and that was how that ended. And then we were actually moving like a week later for a job, so that like was a very defined ending to that chapter of trying to get help. In Rochester, I went, you know, I read some reviews and tried to find a good OBGYN, and I went to one. She was great. She at least she seemed to know what I had. When I came into the office, she actually had me come and sit with her in her office instead of putting me in the exam room, which was like such a little thing, but it was already a kind of a gesture that just showed me, okay, you understand a little bit where I'm coming from. And she said, I want to make sure there's nothing wrong from the surgery, so we're going to do an exam under anesthesia, and then I'll refer you out to someone that can deal with what you have. We still didn't have a name for the condition at that point.
Yeah, weren't they calling it vulvodynia?
They were calling it vulvodynia. Well, no, at that point, she didn't give me any names. She just said, we're going to look and see what's going on. So we did that exam, and then she referred me to a doctor of gynecologic specialties who had a really good reputation, not just in the area, but internationally. So I was really excited about that because she didn't seem surprised. You know, this was my first experience with someone that was looking at it as, oh, okay, you know, we've seen this before, there are ways to deal with this. So I was really hopeful at that point. And we went to this other doctor, you know, I don't know, probably a month or two later, and he called it vulvodynia or vulvodynia with severe levator spasms, so basically vaginismus. But I didn't really know at that point. Whatever he said was like gospel truth to me. So he tried, we did dilators there, didn't work out really well for me because I still, you know, it was the same as like trying a tampon at that point. It was impossible in my mind. So went back and forth with him for like 6 months, and then he referred me to a physical therapist who was a specialty physical therapist. So she dealt with things, I guess, similar to this. And she tried a number of different things, from dilators to biofeedback, which was a really frustrating experience, to different kind of like pressure massage, attempting to see if it's a relaxing issue, see if it's can I control my breathing and by controlling my breathing, control the muscles in my pelvic area, a lot of different things like that. And home attempts with the dilators, which I had for the first time a little bit of success with, which again I was really excited about, like, oh man, I felt like I had, kind of gotten over one hill because I knew something could go in, and the experience was not fun and it was painful, but I did it, so I felt a sense of accomplishment there. But that quickly kind of darkened as there was no consistency. I would be like, oh, today I can do it, tomorrow I can't. Why is that? And she didn't seem to really know. And I think also the discouragement that came with that inconsistency led me to, I allowed myself to get very discouraged, and through the discouragement not as consistent with the home treatment, because it was such a emotional issue for me that I didn't want it was an emotional undertaking that I just couldn't always bring myself to do every single night, because the failure, I already felt a huge sense of failure, and the treatment, anytime I would be going to treatment or trying something, I was telling myself I'm doing something about this, I'm not just, being defeated by it. But then when I was defeated by it, I would become very overwhelmed and discouraged and just feel very hopeless. So went through the physical therapy for a year. And then she referred me back to the gynecologic specialties doctor, and he tried a couple things, which included topical anesthetic, inserting anesthetic with a catheter, and then trying insertions. We talked about antidepressants, we talked about Botox. Those were the only two things. The antidepressants I wasn't interested in, just because of what I knew or thought I knew about them at that time. I first of all didn't think that was the issue. I was still very bothered by the idea that it could all be in my head, because I felt very strongly that I want this, and there have been moments that I absolutely believed it can happen. If it was up to me, it would have happened. And then with the Botox, we got to that point, and he said, I don't really necessarily think this helps, and there's really I don't have any history to tell you that this is going to help you, but it's something that we could try. And at that point, we were just kind of hemming and hawing on it, no, it's expensive, and it's another thing, and he doesn't even seem confident, and he has seemed confident before, and it hasn't helped. So that just fizzled, and that was about 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, in your last appointment, he said, this is the end of my expertise, and if there's any new developments, then I'll contact you.
Yeah.
So
I called back a few times, just because every once in a while I just had this desperation to be doing something about it, and I would call and just say, hey, this is Rachel, I'm a former patient, or I'm a current patient, and I just wanted to get in touch with the doctor and see if blah, blah, blah. And I never heard anything back, so I just assumed, there wasn't any news. And we got to a point where I never really gave up, because to me, I couldn't accept the idea that I would have this forever. Jeff was he was more ready to accept it in general, from the get-go. He was always really encouraging and just not allowing me to wallow, and just be we have a really good thing, and this is one, I think the wording he used once was, don't let a technicality define us, And he just said, this may be forever, and you need to start thinking that way, or at least pray about whether you're ready to accept that, if this is what God has for you. And I just never was. So, no treatment for a couple of years, no anything. I didn't even do like exams under anesthesia because I figured like I'm young, I don't know that I necessarily really need the exam every year, and it's expensive. But last summer, July 7th, our friends, Jen and Jordan, were getting married, and we were helping with their wedding. It was a beautiful wedding. It was perfect. And it was a lot of people that we love, very much, just a really close community coming around this couple, that similarly to us were very young, just crazy about each other, didn't have a rock solid plan for their life, except they knew that they loved the Lord, they loved each other, and they were ready to embark on that journey. So we, the wedding went perfectly, we danced, and it was late, we sent them off with sparklers or whatever, and as we started cleaning up, I just started to have a meltdown in my own mind. I was just I saw all these similarities, and I saw their anticipation of what they had coming. Not just sex, but the whole idea of the union. So based on what we believe about Christ and the church, marriage is supposed to be a picture of that union. And so that oneness is a big deal symbolically. And I think that way. So for me, it's not just mechanically I can't do this, or as a woman I'm not functional. Those are parts of it that were huge. But it was this is a really beautiful thing that's supposed to happen. It's supposed to be part of this dynamic. And why can't we, So I just, I drove home a little bit early. Jeff was still helping. And it was just one of those bad nights, I was just crying and on the internet doing my circle of searches on Google, treatment for vaginismus, treatment for vulvodynia, cured vulvodynia, cured vaginismus, and reading all the things I've read a million times before. And I somehow happened upon the Women's Therapy Center website for the first time. I have no idea why I never found it before, but I started reading through it, and it was almost surreal, because of course the first thing I did is go to testimonials, because I want to hear, if it's the same, and if it's as bad as me, and I just started eating up the testimonials, oh my goodness, this sounds so much like me, or, this really is what I have, and I ordered the book that night, and told Jeff about it the next day, and he was a little reticent because we had been through all of this treatment, and every time I would get psyched, I'd come home oh, this doctor really knows what he's doing, it's gonna be 2 months, it's gonna be over, and he was okay, we can't put all of our faith in doctors, and I don't want you to be disappointed again.
Yeah, because I feel when there were even times when we would try again, or maybe we just in our heads, let's just give it one more try, and that would be when it wouldn't work, Rachel would be a new low, so it would be it would just get worse every time. So I didn't want to her to crash again, put all our faith in one thing.
Because it was easier at that point, since we've been zero treatment for 2 years. We just didn't talk about it, it was we started talking about kids, we started talking about adoption, but we didn't talk about it, there was no point in doing that. So opening the door, because I can kind of stay even keeled for a long time if we don't open that door. I'd be fine, except when Jeff said, when we address the treatment, whatever capacity, or address the issue, whatever that looked like. So he was right to be concerned. We talked about it, we did a lot of reading and tried to get some information about the center other than from the center's website, because we were well, of course it's going to look perfect on the website. Read the book, And then at that point, I had told my friend and kind of mentor, Janice, I had told her about the issue. And that was a really big deal for me because I didn't tell people, not my best friend, not anyone. At that point, my mom knew because it had eventually just come out. But telling Janice was a big deal. So she knew that as far as we knew it was untreatable and it was a long-term thing, but that I just wanted her to understand that aspect of our life and of my life. And we told her and her husband, who is our pastor, about the center, and Jeff suggested I give her the book so that, she could have a better understanding, because she really was very surprised by, but also interested in.
Rachel was always really super vague about
Yeah.
about it with anyone. It would be like, I don't know, she would just be super vague and no one would ever walk away with any kind of understanding.
Yeah, like,
which is fine. Like
basically,
it was,
like, something's wrong, it's really personal, the end. Like,
yeah.
because it was too embarrassing. Like, I couldn't imagine looking someone I know in the eye and telling them I can't have sex. I can't have any of these normal things that everyone, 14-year-old girl can do, tampon or otherwise. So, yeah, and with Janice, I had meant to be as vague as that, but
She kept pressing.
she's very sweet and very trustworthy, but also not shy. So she was kind of just like, oh, so what does that mean? So what does that look like? So do you mean this? And eventually it's like, okay, this is what it is, But Jeff, so I didn't want to give her the book, because I was like, there's a lot of detail in that, and that's going to be humiliating. And once they know, they know. You can't take it back. He said, if you can trust her to tell her, you can trust her to have all of the information. So I gave her the book. She called me the next morning and was like, Rachel, I cannot get over this, that there are this many people that have had this condition, which I have never heard of in my life. She said, you need to go here. Like, you need to figure out how to go. Because at that point, we knew we wanted to go, but the cost was a big issue for us, as our insurance won't pay for any of it. So, let's see. So we started, we knew we wanted to go, but we didn't have a definitive plan for what that was going to look like, other than let's try to save up money and eventually go. Then by January 2nd, we were doing some planning. So this was of 2013, this year. We were doing planning for the year, for youth. We lead the youth group at our church, and just for our life for the year. And I just said to Jeff, I think I'm going to email the Women's Therapy Center right now and just save dates, because I just need to have it on the calendar, and then we'll just figure it out, There's so much detail, I don't know how much to... Through a strange series of events, my parents ended up talking to friends who have a home on Long Island, who mentioned, I don't know exactly how the conversation went down, but basically they told us if you do go between October and April, we have this home that won't be in use, that you would be more than welcome to. Which was a huge deal, cost-wise, obviously, but just to have a place to stay that we didn't have to pay for, that would be private, and close enough to the center that we could do it. So that was also a factor in why I felt I could put the dates on the calendar, because it was like a head start, and to me that was confirmation that that God was going to bless this journey for us. So we put it on the calendar, and a few months later, in, I guess, end of May, early June, the details are kind of confusing, so I'll leave them out. But basically, I found out that there was another couple in the church that the woman has vaginismus, and that they were coming to the center, which blew my mind, because I think of it as being really rare, and it's a small church, so it took me about 5 seconds once I was told there's another couple that
We have 120 people. 150 people.
And there's only so many young people, and there's only so many young couples, and there's only so many young couples without children. So it was like, okay, I know who it is. And it turned out to be Janice's, my mentor, who I mentioned earlier, daughter and her husband, whose wedding we were at a year ago when I found out about the center that night. So I immediately connected with Jen. You know, we had like this 4-hour conversation, you know, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And her asking me questions, me asking her questions. And, you know, she was going to be going to the center a month later in July. It just blew my mind. And so we basically spent a week just saying, Jeff and I, to each other, I can't believe it.
That's crazy.
Jen's mom, came to me right after it all came out and just said, if you had not given me that book, I don't know what I would have thought. You know, if you hadn't told me about this and I didn't know this condition existed and my daughter came to me and said, this is what's going on, who knows what I would have told her, but it would not have been, oh, there's a place you can go, there's an answer. And it's just to think that Jen could have gone through surgery and like hopeless treatment after treatment, but that she was able to find out, instead that she was able to find out about this place and come, you know, before I even came, was like the greatest possible gift. And you know, as we talked about it, it was like, if this is the only reason that we ended up having to have that 6-year road instead of a year road, it would be worth it. Because I would never want anyone to have to go through all of that, you know, needless, when there is an answer out there. So they came, and I told her I was actually kind of glad she was going first because she could be the guinea pig. 'Cause, you know, of course I was pretty nervous about it. And it went wonderfully. She came back, you know, and just said, I'm not going to give you any details, but it's amazing. You're going to love them, and you're going to come back, and you're going to be cured. And that was another huge gift. So, yeah, that's the weird story, I guess, of how we eventually found out about the center and how Jen found out about the center. And actually it was through the support, we had financial help from people in the church and family who knew either specifically that I have vaginismus or just that there's a medical condition that's personal, and were willing to help us get here by the time that we had set to come. So it's been a year of overwhelming gifts, you know, from God and from people.
When Jen and Rachel got together, Jordan and I also met and talked, and then the 4 of us talked too, and it was cool because like Rachel had told her mom, but I had never told anyone about it, and I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, Jordan and I talked about it, and it was really cool to. I remember we had him over and just like talking in our living room about it, and it was just weird, you know.
And even like joking about it,
Yeah.
you know, just like all the awkwardness it creates socially and.
Yeah, and like how you would never know by looking at a couple, like it doesn't come up a lot, like, so how's intercourse going, you know? It never comes up, so it was just crazy because like we see them every week, like they're close friends of ours, and it was just really cool to like just talk about it, you know, after 6 years of thinking we were the only ones. So yeah, it was really neat. I didn't tell anybody because I think mostly because to protect Rachel from, I knew she felt shame about it, and we were, I mean, I didn't see any reason to tell anybody. I didn't feel like I needed counseling or therapy. We had a really healthy marriage, and I knew we were, especially Rachel, was working really hard to find someone with an answer. So I never doubted that So, that would be the only reason I would talk to somebody, like, hey, have you ever heard of this? And, because I knew no one had, so.
We talked, leading up to the trip, we were both getting really excited, not just, we both work like normal people. We work a lot and we have a lot of stressors in our day-to-day life, and there was an aspect of this that was like, we're going to get away for 3 weeks and we're going to deal with the biggest problem that we've had in our marriage, that I've had in my life, and have this time and then have time to process and just be together. And we were both really excited about it and talking about it all the time, and just, it's going to be awesome. We're going to check out New York City, and not talking specifically so much about the treatment. I think because we had no idea what to expect detail-wise. And all I needed to know was I was going to be cured, and I absolutely believed that. So, I expected that I would feel very nervous as we drove here. Sunday, I thought the nerves would kick in on the way here. I'd be like, oh my goodness, I actually have to, get on the table. I know this is gonna be hard, but I felt a lot of peace. I just felt peace and anticipation that this was it, and that the only worry, I guess, that I had was myself. And I think I said this a few times to Jeff, is that I just don't want to get in my own way, and in the past I have had varied experiences with doctors, and sometimes I have known, I don't know what the answer is, but I know this isn't it. And knowing that I could trust Dietz and Ross, even before I got here, I didn't want to get in my own way and have those mechanisms kick in of, no, we're done here. Because I had learned that. And there are times that I really had just, nope, I'm done. And I knew I couldn't do that here, and that wouldn't be helpful. So my only real fear coming in was, am I going to get in my own way? Am I going to freak out when it's not productive for me to do so? Not that it usually ever is, but.
And so on the way here, I kept, in the mornings especially, I would remind her, they know what they're doing. They've done this 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, just to try to reinforce, you don't need to be worried.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, from, Jordan and Jen, and then after the first day here, I felt like my job was to, distract her with, sightseeing and, stuff to do around town or in the city. And so that especially, I was totally, I trusted them, and my biggest job was to Google what to do next,
Well, it really helped me the first day that it was, we talked a lot. But it wasn't, I was thinking, okay, we're going to dredge up every reason why this might have happened, or and it wasn't like that, which I appreciated. But I was given a lot of confidence. The confidence I already had in them was reinforced as we talked on the first day, that I just needed to let them run the show, and I was going to be fine. So there wasn't a ton of fear conscious fear that I had going in. Coming in the first day, I was pretty, just the reality of, okay, we're going to get serious here. Am I ready for this?
The first day of physical?
The first day of the physical treatment. And I was just amazed at how quickly I overcame things that, how quickly I got past, points that I had been to before with months of work, and how much more power I had over this thing that had ruled me than I realized. And that was day one. Day one of physical treatment. By the end of day one, I was not at the mercy of this thing. It was still very difficult. I was still, a little oh man, what's tomorrow gonna hold? But I knew that I wasn't at the mercy of it, and that would have been enough to come here for that, just that,
Yeah, I remember after the first day of physical treatment, it was amazing. the progress she had already made, and just it was obvious the doctors had like the key to whatever the problem was, because it was, I mean, Rachel, like the smallest thing couldn't penetrate, and they had already made huge progress on that day. And I was encouraged by that. Rachel was like amazed. We went, like, when we got in the car on the way home, she was like crying because it was amazing. And I don't know, so after the first day we were like, it was just reaffirmed, like, okay, this is gonna be fine.
And another of my fears was, like we said before, about the whole, I can be totally fine and reasonable and even talk about this fairly clinically, like, but once we get to like the personal aspect and the opening that door up again for the treatment and trying to fight it, in the past it's been a really emotional, and I get very frustrated by that because I don't like to be overcome by my emotions. And so I was very nervous that with the physical treatment I would just become like this blubbering mess, and they would be frustrated with me and just be like, oh, we can't deal with this, come back when you can pull yourself together, you know. That's what I was anticipating. And I know that it's different for everyone, but for me, the first day, like the only time that I cried was when Jeff came in after I was able to make a certain amount of progress. And you know, they just gave us a minute because I was like getting myself back together. And it just like, we just looked at each other and it was like, this is so incredible, you know? And that was like, that's where the tears came, because I was just amazed. And there wasn't room for any negative emotion, you know, even about the difficult things that, you know, had yet to be accomplished. There just wasn't room for it because it was so incredible that we were already at that point, you know. So yeah, I guess it's always hard to say, like, to compare this is what I expected with this is what happened, because now I can't remember what I expected because I know what happened. But I was amazed. I knew that the doctors knew what they were doing. I knew that they were capable of curing it. I didn't realize what I was capable of doing. And I wouldn't, if I had come here and not done anything and they had just like worked on me and cured me, that probably would have been what I expected. But coming and having them kind of put the power in my hands and say, oh no, you can definitely do this. You know, it's not in charge of you. In a way that was helpful, not in a way that was, I guess to say that sounds weird to me because I've felt so much responsibility and shame in the past, like this is my problem, why can't I fix it? And it's weird that the answer is actually pretty close to that, but without being, it's not a condemning thing, it's an empowering thing, you know. I couldn't have cured this myself at home, but with them, we did, kind of thing, if that makes sense. And that was the biggest surprise to me.
Definitely the first week, it was like a weight lifted off her shoulders, you know, and almost like I don't know, and especially like with the treatment, we were like talking about things we had never like talked about because it was either like hurtful, like to bring up for Rachel, or because it's just like, why would we ever talk about it? Like almost like a medical terminology, I guess, that we would never use. And I guess it broke down like a kind of like an unspoken barrier that was there, where we knew each other, or at least I knew her more intimately and more like closely. Where before it was always kind of like because it was something she couldn't do, there was like a wall up, and it was like a guarded, like, I don't want you to, you know, kind of, she didn't want me near that part of herself, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And in that first week, it was like, obviously, like the first day, we did something like when I go into and she kind of shows me progress, it was something like I couldn't picture us doing before, you know. So it was like she was totally cool with it and totally like free from that bondage, I guess. You know, in our relationship, like we always, and like we were good friends and like we're best friends and we always play like devil's advocate with each other. Like if one of us is like a Susie Sunshine and the other's like, well, have you thought about this? And I feel like this is like, you know, an extreme version of that. But like I knew if she was sad about something or, you know, obviously like stricken with she wasn't ever depressed. And I mean you were depressed, but not like in a state of depression. She was never like that. But when she was down, like I always felt like it was my job to like pick her up. And if both of us were depressed, it would be terrible. And so that's like kind of what drove me, I guess, to be like the positive side. But I knew like even before like we found out about the center, like it wasn't something that defined us. Like it wasn't like I really was ready. Like if there was no cure, like we are creative and we're spontaneous and we're in love. So like it wasn't something that I was like, this has to happen, and you have 1 year to like make it happen. So I guess to the guys, like just be patient and yeah, just try to put yourself in their shoes. Okay, so I knew that when I got to know Rachel and I wanted, I had to have her. Like it was a very quick thing. I knew I would never find someone like her, and so I decided quickly that I was going to be committed to her, and when through everything, like I knew, like I didn't want her just to have, like I wanted to have her not just for myself, but I wanted to have her to protect and to care for, and so when I knew like she was going through this, I knew I had to be strong. We kind of talked about this today that like if I had like given in to like bitterness or you know, like why me, I knew he would sink quickly. So so when I understood that what she was going through was worse than what I was, with the shame and with, you know, guilt, and I knew if I was in her shoes I would have felt worse. Like I'm more emotional, obviously, and and I knew that I had to be strong. I had to, you know, kind of, I don't know, like be there for her, and I also knew that like life with her would be, you know, without intercourse would be better than with anyone else with intercourse. So like it wasn't like something that I was like demanding of her, you know. So I guess what I would encourage guys who have spouses or girlfriends to think about is that what the woman's going through is much worse than what we are, and like a woman, especially like a woman that you're committed to, is more important than someone to have sex with, you know. So much more, and like I just so anyway, I was committed to Rachel, and we both said, for better or for worse, and it, it got worse, and I wasn't going anywhere.
I don't know of anywhere else that does what Dietza and Ross do, and so my first thing would be, get here, it doesn't, whatever the cost is, however difficult it is to come by, whatever, just do whatever you can to make it happen, because it is worth it. Is worth it. And as much as that seems like it would be obvious to anyone with vaginismus who's going through that struggle, there is a point where, you have this, like, giving up feeling. Don't give up. And I guess the other thing would be, don't talk yourself out of, and I think the website does a great job with this, and the book is even better for confirmation, but don't talk yourself out of being a treatable patient, because I was doing that literally right up until we drove here for the physical part of the treatment. I was like, or not the physical part, but for the first day, I was still saying to Jeff, like, well, on paper, it was never really said that it was vaginismus. On paper, it was vulvodynia, et cetera, like, maybe mine is a little bit different, maybe it's not, what they do, and what if I get there and they're like, oh, actually, you have something different than vaginismus, So even up until that last moment, I was talking myself out of being a candidate for the, total success. And I would just say don't. Because, not just because of my case, but because of what I've heard and seen and experienced talking with the doctors. Like, they know what they're doing. And if you have questions about it, one thing I've really appreciated is how easy it is to communicate with you guys, even before I came here. You get an answer very quickly, and you're not left out hanging like, oh, they don't know what to do with this question, But the other thing, which has nothing to do, it doesn't have to do specifically with this treatment center, the doctors are being cured, that I would want to say to a couple like us, to a couple who's maybe married and maybe you can't get to the center right away, or whatever it is, you can't get treated right now. One of the things we feel really fortunate about is that we've been able to have a really intimate marriage, and a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times because we haven't told very many people, but when we tell someone about the condition, there's this kind of misunderstanding that we must be really, really good friends, like to be able to be married for years with no sexuality in our marriage. And
like we shake hands,
like
good night.
Good night, love you. And I just would say that one of the things that kept us afloat, or kept me afloat, was trying to be open-minded and be creative and enjoy being a married couple, and not let, like Jeff said that one time to me, like not let the technicality define it. And that's hard, because you can give in to discouragement, because there is a physical problem that can affect even other avenues for that sexuality, but just not to let it destroy your whole sexual relationship, where possible, and that you can really enjoy being married while you wait for the answer. And there is one, and so you don't have to be without hope, first of all, most importantly. But second of all, that's just the one little side thing that we've ended up talking about a lot, because the more people we talk to, the more we realize, I guess, it's not always the case. And it's heartbreaking to me to think of how different things would be for us if either of us had shut down because of the issue.